Our story starts with Dr. Thomas Light and Dr. Albert Wily. Again, but this time in their later years. But first, I'm gonna mention two things that I forgot to mention in the first part. Basically, Mega Man has a copy ability, I forgot to mention that. He can copy Robot Master's weapons. Sometimes it's not exactly like the weapon they used during their boss fight, but it's similar. And second is, in Mega Man 9, we were introduced to robots having expiration dates. The reason I mention the expiration dates is because when we get into the X series, I'm gonna let you know, basically everybody from the classic games is dead. That includes the robots. Okay, back to what I was saying before. So, Dr. Light was working on a robot, maybe kind of after the events of Robo-Enza from Mega Man 10. Or maybe a little bit after Dr. Wily was like, hey, you know, I'm just gonna frame Dr. Light. He was working on a robot called Mega Man X, or just X. And he is what is considered to be the foundation for the Reprolids. He was made without an expiration date, meaning he doesn't exactly have an expiration date. He was told he was in a capsule for a little bit. He was made to be in a capsule for a little bit for him to mature. It's supposed to be like 20 years, maybe 15 years or something, but it ended up being 100 years. And when he woke up, it was 21XX. But now we're gonna go back to Wily. He also was making a new robot, but it's not a good robot, it's a bad robot because it's Dr. Wily. That robot's name is Zero. And, people theorize that Zero, like, was just killed Wily, but no. He was also set to mature. That's not accurate. He was set to mature as well. Also, Zero's purpose was to kill either classic Mega Man or kill X. One of the two. I'm not sure which. 100 years after X has been asleep, he wakes up because a man by the name of Dr. Kane is, like, researching an old abandoned, Dr. Light lab, and he stumbles across a capsule concealing X. And, he wakes him up, and X is like, hello, and such, and Dr. Kane's like, what the heck are you? And X is like, I don't know. And then, basically, Dr. Kane decides he's gonna build some robots and call them Reploids, based on X's schematics. He's also the creator of Sigma, who's very important, let me tell you that. Anyway, like I said, let's fast forward a little bit. Sigma gets a kind of a distress call, sort of, and he goes on to where the distress call was, and he finds out that there's a Maverick. That's what they call the evil Reploids. And it's Zero. He's being a vicious murderer, and basically Sigma gets his ass kicked. His arm gets cut off. His face is completely messed up. But then Zero starts freaking out because he has this thing on his gem. Don't even get me started on those gems. I don't know. There's a Wily thing in there because there's a W, and it's like a thing that calms Zero down, or like tells Zero, warn Zero, if you keep doing this stuff, I'm going to disarm you permanently. But then Sigma punches it, and he wins, and then he, like, takes him back. Then after some repairs, Zero is a good guy, and he's X's best friend. And sometime later, we start the Day of Sigma stuff. Day of Sigma, Part 1, starts off with, basically there's a giant mechanoid that's, like, destroying a building, and they're trying to stop it. And then X drops in, like, and then, basically, he's told to shoot the mechanoid, but the problem is, because of his free will, he's too hesitant to do it because there's an innocent Reploid in the way, so Sigma takes care of it himself. After this, Sigma has a talk with Dr. Kane about X's hesitation that day. And Dr. Kane mentions something about X's free will, which other Reploids don't exactly have. And Sigma gets a little cheeky idea there.
Back at the Hunter base, X and Zero are tasked with going to Abel City. Specifically the east, which is the darkest, which is like a dark and lonely kind of area because of Maverick sightings and stuff. Once X and Zero get inside, they see a lot of dead Reploids. After a while, the rest of the 17th unit, that's the unit X and Zero are part of, I think, they show up and they search the computers, and there's nothing on the computers. Sigma then comes in and asks what happened. And Zero says that the Reploids died due to they got striked with weak spots, saying it was kind of similar to what Sigma would do. Next day, another Berserk Mechanaloid is around, and then Sigma decides to meet Vile in prison.
That same day, X and Zero are going to the Berserk Mechanaloid. They find it suspicious because the Berserk Mechanaloid is around the same day Vile is missing from his cell. And they've also lost contact with Sigma. Some other stuff happens later, and then there's another hack attack, so X and Zero go visit that. It's at the missile base. Once they get there, Sigma is also there. Once Zero investigates, Sigma's like, hey, I'm just gonna go stab Zero, which he does. It's like, just kidding, Zero gets out of the way because he was expecting that. X then tries to shoot Sigma, but Sigma holds up Zero's body, and kinda makes X kinda weary about it. Then he actually does some harm to Zero. And then Sigma presses a button that makes the missiles go, and then X gets impaled. And then the missiles actually go head towards the city. After something that of which I already mentioned earlier, X's ultimate potential is unleashed.
And then he and Sigma have a pretty cool fight, which I'm just gonna play the audio on, because it's a pretty good fight, if I'm being honest. That's pretty cool.
So this is the power that you possess. The potential to advance all Reploids.
And then Zero wakes up, and then X takes him back to the base. And then we have probably the coolest scene in this. Sigma standing over the ruined city, laughing, being evil. First up is Mega Man X. The story for this game is, the year is 21XX. Sigma, who had been prey to the greatest Maverick hunter, suddenly declared his intention to annihilate the human race. Following Sigma's orders, Reploids in various regions began rebelling. In order to put an end to Sigma's ambitions, the Maverick Hunter X and his comrade Zero set out into the field of battle. After the intro stage, we meet Vile for the first time, but he's in his ride armor. And then Zero comes in, because you can't beat him. He comes in and he just blasts the arm off with the ride armor, and then Vile escapes. And then you fight the Mavericks, which the Mavericks for this game are
Chill Penguin, Flame Mammoth, Storm Eagle, Armored Armadillo, Boomer Coanger, Spark Mandrill, Launch Octopus, and Sting Chameleon. In 4 of the stages you will find an armor for X, which gives him a dash ability, a better knockback thing, a better buster, and you're able to crush things with your helmet. You can also collect 8 heart tanks, which they upgrades, they get you more health, and you can get sub tanks, which are your E tanks for the game. You can also get the Hadouken from Street Fighter, which can do it can kill bosses in like one hit.
Or you could not get that. It works too. It basically be just doing the same thing. After you beat the bosses, you meet up with Zero again, and you guys make your way into Sigma's fortress. And then once you go halfway, you meet Vile again. Him and Zero go into a different room. Zero Vile locks him up. He's back in his ride armor. You fight him, but you lose again. Zero busts out and blows himself up. You regain your health, and then you fight Vile outside of his ride armor, and then you beat him, and he's dead. And then you go meet Zero. He's also dead. And then you beat the rest of the Sigma stages, and you go on to Sigma, and you beat him, and then he turns into a wolf. And you beat him, and that's Mega Man X1 for you. Next up is Mega Man X2. The story for this game is, 6 months have passed since the battle against Sigma. The transformation of Reploids into Mavericks and their ensuing rebellion only showed signs of getting worse. Amidst the chaos, a manufactured Maverick was discovered bearing a chip with Sigma's symbol engraved upon it. Even as X confirmed the presence of Sigma's shadow over these mysterious circumstances, the Maverick Rebellion's new ringleaders, the X-Hunters, appeared before him. The X-Hunters are Violin, Agile, and Sergus. Signal, he's not dead. He has a new body. And, basically what you do with the X-Hunters, they will, after you beat 2 levels, they will be in stages you've not been to yet. And if you beat them, you get Zero's parts. Speaking of stages, the Mavericks for this game are Wire Sponge, Flame Stag, Bubble Crab, Wheel Gator, Overdrive Ostrich, Crystal Snail, Morph Moth, and Magna Centipede. After you beat the X-Hunter stages, you go on to Magna Centipede's level again, which is where Sigma is. After you get into where Sigma is at, which is halfway through the level, depending on if you got Zero's parts or not, either Zero just busts in and destroys Sigma's copy of Zero, fake copy of Zero, or you fight Zero. I don't think the fighting Zero is canon though. Then Zero will break through the ground and you fight Sigma. And his first form is just the form you saw earlier. In his second form, he turns into a Sigma virus. Really weird one, if I'm being honest. And that's it for... Also, the armor for this game is called the Giga Armor. And it is is actually my favorite armor in the Mega Man X games, because it just looks really cool. And that's it for Mega Man X2. Next up is Mega Man Xtreme. The story for this game is, the mother computer at Hunter Base, the Maverick Hunter's headquarters, has been hacked by an unknown source. All of its data was overwritten in an instant, and the resulting fake data has sent the whole world spiraling into chaos. The command center spreads X out to face the as-yet unidentified enemy, who has resurrected Maverick data from the past. In this game, there are these things called Shadow Hunters, and the Shadow Hunters are a guy named Zane and Gemmel. They work for Sigma. There are also these 2 brothers named Midi and Techno. Techno actually works with Zane and Gemmel to hack the computer, meaning he works for Sigma. Your Mavericks for this game are some from X1 and some from X2. And your armor for this game is the same one from X1, and your Sigma boss fight is just the same as X1. That's it for Mega Man Xtreme. Next up is Mega Man X3. The story for this game is Dr. Doppler, a brilliant Reploid scientist, discovered that the Sigma virus was what was causing Reploids to become Mavericks. By engineering a cure, Dr. Doppler was successful in neutralizing the Maverick Rebellion. A few months later, though, the Mavericks that had been neutralized suddenly commenced their own rebellion under Dr. Doppler's guidance. In order to reveal the truth of the situation and to regain peace, X heads to battle once again. In the intro stage, we meet a guy named Mac, who's a part of the 17th unit, and he's Maverick now, and he kidnapped X. So you play Zero for a little bit and get X. Sigma's in this game. He's actually the one who manipulated Dr. Doppler into making him a new body, and a lot of other things. In this game, we're introduced to something called a Nightmare Police, which there are two characters called Bit and Byte, who are based on bits and bytes, you know, the computer terms, and they go to different stages after you beat two bosses. Vile's also back, and he does that same thing. He's not a part of the Nightmare Police though. But if you don't beat Bit or Byte, the first boss you beat in Dr. Doppler Stage 1, you got they merged together by the name of God, Car, Machine, O, and Ari. Probably spelled a lot of that. I probably said a lot of that wrong. But that's okay. The bosses for this game are Blast Hornet, Blizzard Buffalo, Tunnel Rhino, Gravity Beetle, Volt Catfish, Neon Tiger, Toxic Seahorse, and Crushed Crawfish. The armor for this game is called the Max Armor. There are upgrades for it, other than the armor upgrades. But if you don't get them, then you can get something called the Golden Armor, which is hidden underneath the false wall in Dr. Doppler Stage 1.
After you fight Sigma, he has a more powerful form called the Kaiser form. People say it's really hard to hit him with the Z-Saber. How you get the Z-Saber is once you get to the sub-boss, before you enter the sub-boss room for Doppler Stage 2. This has to be after you beat Vile with the blades when you first meet him. Once you do that, you go into the mini-boss, and then you proceed to kill the mini-boss. And then Zero kind of like almost dies, so he has to go back, but he gives X his saber, and then you get his saber. People say it's really hard to do to get High Kaiser Sigma with all of his health going bye-bye, but it's really not that hard. I've done it multiple times pretty easily. But after you beat Kaiser Sigma, there's like a chase thing with the Sigma virus, but then there's no exit. So Doppler comes in and destroys the Sigma virus along with himself, and then you leave somehow. And that's it for X3. The next game is Mega Man Xtreme 2. The story for this game is, when a Reploid's programming was suddenly deleted one day without reason or warning, panic began to ensue. The phenomenon soon spread in these terrifying incidents that left numerous Reploids as lifeless hunks of metal, never to move again, have come to be identified as erasers. One day the eraser phenomenon swept over a large crowd of Reploids, leaving the Maverick Hunter Command Center with little choice but to send X and Zero out to find the source of this plague. The villain for this game is a witch called Bricana and her knight Gareth. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know the reason for their motives because I haven't really played this game. Iris is in this game, but she's not like the one in X4, which is the game I'm gonna talk about next. She's not exactly, she's still training for whatever she was training for whatever she was doing in X4. The Mavericks for this game are the rest of the X2 bosses and some from X3. And the armor for this game has the appearance of the one from X2, but it also has some elements from the X3 armor as well. That's it for Mega Man Xtreme 2. Next up is Mega Man X4.
The story for this game is, many Reploids have banded together and established their own army called Repid Force. Though they initially cooperated with the Maverick Hunters, their leader general suddenly declared that Repliforce was to be its own, independent nation. The Maverick Hunter Command Center subsequently declared all of Repliforce to be Mavericks and sent X and Zero out to deal with them. But surprise, surprise, Sigma had a talk with General into joining his cause, which is destroying the human race. Also, there are 3 new characters in this game, 2 of which are if you play as X or as Zero. The first one I'm going to mention is Colonel. He is Iris' sister. Iris is important to the Zero story, which is just kind of just the same as the X story, but some things are different. And there's also Double, which is a character that you play, that helps X if you play as X. He's also working with Sigma. His real form is pretty cool, if I'm being honest. The bosses for this game are Frost Walrus, Web Spider, Split Mushroom, Magma Dragoon, Jet Stingray, Cyber Peacock, Storm Owl, and Slash Beast. There are 3 armors for this game. 1 is the main armor for the game, and 2 are armors you can put in with codes. The first armor is the Force armor, and then the 2 other ones are the Ultimate armor, which is just the best armor in the games from now on. And then you have Black Zero, which is just doesn't really add anything to stats or anything. It's just a different skin, pretty much. That's it for Mega Man X4. Next up is Mega Man X5. The story for this game is several months passed since the Great Repliforce War. One day, the Grand Space Colony, or Eurasia, suddenly went out of control and began falling toward Earth. The only way to save Earth now would be to destroy Eurasia with the Enigma, a powerful beam common from an age long past. With only 16 hours left to find the parts necessary to get the Enigma online, X and Zero deploy in full force. Whilst doing so, they meet a guy named Dynamo, who's pretty much there to waste your time. He just wants you to fight him. He's working for Sigma, obviously, but, he's just there to waste your time. In this game, we have 3 new characters. Cygnus, who was the last creation of Dr. Kane. Douglas, who's pretty much the guy who builds Enigma, if you get the parts. And then there's Alia, your operator. The bosses for this game are Crescent Grizzly, Volt Kraken, Shining Firefly, Tidal Whale, Spiral Pegasus, Spike Rose Red, Dark Necrobat, and Burnt Diax. This game has 4 armors. You have, actually 5 if you think about it. You get the return of the Force armor from X4, that's where you play as for the intro stage, or you can play it with the rest of the game. There's the Falcon armor, the Gaia armor. Towards the end of the game, you can get the Ultimate armor if you play as X, and you can get the Dark Zero if you play as Zero. This is the game where you first fight Zero, or if you're playing as Zero, you first fight X. And this is also, like I said, this is supposed to be the last game, so Zero dies at the end. And I would assume, because they made the Zero series after this, I would assume the story was probably going to be something like Zero's like revived or something, but that never actually ended up working out. That's it for Mega Man X5. Next up is Mega Man X6. Story for this game is, thanks to Zero's selfless sacrifice, Earth was saved from the immediate crash of the Eurasia colony. 3 weeks later, the Reploids were well into the reconstruction of the damaged land when Mavericks, who had all been assumed to be destroyed, showed up without warning. Hoping to get to the bottom of this puzzling occurrence, X steps out into the field with Zero's saber in hand. We have 3 new characters this game. We have Gate, the new bad guy for the game. We have Isaac, who is one of the people he works with Gate. He's one of the people who made the Nightmare virus, which is very important for the game. He also made Hymax, the 3rd new character. In the intro stage, you meet him, but you can't beat him. I'm not really sure how he had a weakness, but in one of the Gate stages, whichever one it was, I don't really care. This game isn't that great. The music is great. The music is good, though. He has a weakness, but if you don't use that weakness, you're in for a fun time, though. Sigma and Zero are back. The first time you meet Zero, he's Nightmare Zero, and then you go to a different stage. You use like a teleporter thing, and you fight it, and then your Zero's back. You keep the saber, but he has a different saber. It's curved. It's like a lightsaber because it's curved rather than angular. Sigma's back too, because of course he is. Not really important though, because he's just always there. Bosses for this game are Commander Yarmark, Blizzard Wolfang, Blaze Heatnix, Idle Shark Player, worst stage ever. Rainy Turtloid, Ground Scaravich, Shield Sheldon, and Infinity Maginian. The two armors for this game are the Blade Armor and the Shadow Armor. That's it for Mega Man X6. Next up is Mega Man X7. The story for this, I can't even call it a game because it's really not, it doesn't really function as a game, if I'm being honest. X made the decision to leave the Maverick Hunters in pursuit of a peaceful solution to the fighting. It wasn't long before the paramilitary organization Red Alert, who was known for its unlawful tactics, moved in to replace the weakened Maverick Hunters. One day, while rushing to an incident, Zero ran into Axel, who claimed to have deserted Red Alert in hopes of joining the Maverick Hunters. There's a new guy named Red. He's the leader of Red Alert and works for Sigma. The bosses for this game are Flame Hiner, Vanishing Gungaroo, Ride Borsky, Tornado Tonian, Splash Warfly, Snipe Anteater, Soldier Stone Kong, and Wind Crow Rag. The armor for this game is the Glide Armor. You can glide, and that's it for Mega Man X7. Next up is Mega Man X8. The story for this game is, the Maverick War's destruction of the Earth showed no sign of ceasing, so the human race began looking to space for their survival. Immigration to the moon soon became a reality with the completion of the orbital elevator Jacob. The new generation Reploids, who were able to transform into any other Reploid by altering their DNA, were sent up to the moon to set up a central base. Unfortunately, these Reploids have copied Sigma's DNA, and a rebellion broke out. In order to investigate the situation, X and his team headed up to space. We have 3 new characters and a returning character. The 3 new characters are 2 navigators, Layer and Palette. The other new character is the actual villain of the game, Lumine. And the returning character, it's Vile. He's back for some reason. The bosses for this game are Optic Sunflower, Gravity Antonian, Dark Mantis, Giga Manowar, Burn Rooster, Avalanche Yeti, Earthrock Trilobite, and Bamboo Pandemonium. Also, once you defeat Sigma, he's fully dead. Forever. You've officially just killed him. Then you fight Lumine, who's the real villain. The armors for this game are the neutral armor, the base armor for the game, the Icarus armor, the Hermes armor, the ultimate armor. In my opinion, it's not the ultimate armor, that'll never be the ultimate armor. Black Zero returns, and White Axle. That's it for Mega Man X8. The L4s were a series of very bloody battles that marked the closure of the Maverick Wars, and it is considered to be the worst war in the Mega Man series. It's called the L4s due to the exploitation of many cyber elves. Even though it only lasted 4 years, there were a lot of casualties. 90% of Reploids and 60% of humans were wiped out due to these battles. After X used the Mother Elf to destroy the Sigma virus, the number of Mavericks dropped significantly. It was at this point that the human scientist Dr. Weil proposed Project El Piso, a plan that involved controlling all Reploids by combining the Mother Elf's rewriting abilities to be the perfect ruler. Although X opposed this, the fear of long-lasting war increased the support for Project El Piso. But it turns out Weil wasn't using this for good. Instead, he was using it for his own gain. He wanted to be ruler of a new world. So what he did was, he stole the Mother Elf and put a curse on her, turning her into the Dark Elf. He also created baby elves, which are infant copies of the Dark Elf, which make Reploids turn Maverick and start fighting each other on a grand scale, plunging the world into chaos. With full support from the human government, Dr. Weil continued Project El Piso and continued to exert total control all Reploids in the world by combining the Dark Elf with the Reploid Omega. Omega was constructed by the body of Zero, who at this time was in stasis. Weil used Zero's body because he believed that a body immune to infection would be a perfect weapon to end the Maverick Wars. Zero's brain or soul wasn't in his body, and he was given a new body to help fight against Weil. X continued to fight in the front lines against Mavericks and leading the evil baby elves until he was joined by Zero. Together, X and Zero worked to capture the Dark Elf and eventually used the power to turn the tide of the battle. When the war reached its final stretch, Dr. Weil unleashed the completed Omega in the battlefield, revealing his true ambitions to the world. Dr. Weil's orders Omega, supported by an army of golems, slaughtered countless humans and Reploids alike. After a long struggle, X and Zero defeated Omega with a final strike, and Weil was stopped right before he could combine Omega with the Dark Elf, putting an end to the 4 years of devastating conflict.
Although Omega managed to survive the final battle, the Devil Reploid was sentenced to exile on Earth's orbit with the Forbidden Ark, whereas Dr. Weil was punished in a similar, yet unprecedented manner. Away from public eyes, the human survivors modified Weil's old body, turning him into a cyborg encased in regenerative armor. Dr. Weil's memories were converted into program data, so that he would never forget what he had done, and he was banished, doomed to suffer for eternity in the wastelands of the war. Even though Zero fought bravely in the wars, he feared that his presence would cause history to repeat itself and willingly return to stasis. X moved on to create the city of New Arcadia, to finally bring peace and stability to the survivors. All existing records of the Elf Wars and the crimes committed by Dr. Weil were eventually disposed of in locations such as the sunken library, in order to protect the reputation of the government of the pro-human utopia. Over time, the people of Neo Arcadia would forget Dr. Weil and his sin, and X continued to govern Neo Arcadia until the day he was forced to sacrifice his own body to keep the Dark Elf sealed in Yggdrasil. Largely because of X's appearance, Sea Elf was forced to create a duplicate, which ended up causing Neo Arcadia to descend into a dystopia, where innocent Reploids were branded as Maverick, largely due to Copy X trying to emulate X without any of his experiences. The consequences of this ironically ended up causing Dr. Weil to have his exile revoked, and ultimately have his initial plan, Crow Omega, succeed.